Are you ready for a roller coaster ride of emotions? Buckle up and join us as we dive into the intense world of death sentence. Witness the transformation of a grieving husband into a fearless protector, as Nick Hume takes on the biggest challenge of his life to protect his family. This is a story you won't want to miss, so hit play and let's get started with Benjamin Recaps. The film's title is Death Sentence. A criminal gang murders his son in front of his eyes. He transforms from an office worker to a gangster. Nick has led a peaceful and contented life with his wife and two sons, Lucas and Brendan. Brendan's eldest son was regarded as a spoiled brat. He enjoyed hockey, had won the league, and was content with his family. When they were returning from a hockey game involving Brendan, the eldest son suggested that he go to Canada to become a professional player. He discussed the idea with his father inside the car, and on the way home, he noticed two cars wandering around the store. The car abruptly ran out of fuel. He had to come to a halt in front of the gas station. Because the son was hungry, he went into the store while Nick remained in the car. In a sad scene, the son entered to buy food, and a gang entered to rob the store, killing him. The father did not believe it and turned to face his son, revealing the killer's face. The father tried everything he could to save his son and rushed him to the hospital. However, the son died in the end. The father filed a case against the criminal, withdrew the invitation during the trial, and then decided to take revenge himself, because the lawyer stated that the criminal would not be tried for murder and would only be tried for 3 years because the gas station did not have cameras. Furthermore, there was no witness to the accident. The murderer was freed by the court. Joe and Nick kept an eye on the gang. He took a knife from the house and went to Joe's hiding place. After a long battle, Nick was able to take Joe Heron out of the building. He then threw the knife he used to kill Joe into the sea. He was able to overcome everything that happened and resume his normal life. However, the gang began to look into the murder of Joe, who was the brother of the gang boss, Billy. That's why he started looking for the murderer himself. He started by asking the girl who was with Joe that day. She mentioned seeing an unknown person in a suit walking around the area, and after much thought and debate among the gang members, they could run into anyone they knew. Despite this, Billy developed reservations about Nick. So he took a photograph of him from the newspaper and showed it to Joe's friend, who assured him that he was the one who was hovering around the area. As a result, the feud between the gang and Nick began. Detective Lawrence pays a visit to Nick at work. She informed him that Joe had been murdered by another gang. The detective then noticed a wound in Nick's hand. And of course, this was due to his argument with Joe before killing him. Nick sat down and began to worry that the gang would figure out who he was because of the injury. The prediction was correct. He was surprised to see a member of the gang watching him as soon as he left his workplace, while the others were hiding in different locations. The man pulled out the gun and before shooting Nick, turned around and hit him with a bag he was carrying before fleeing between the alleys. But how would he get away from such a large crowd if he was alone? He entered a parking garage but was struck by a car, which set off the alarm. He attempted to correct his error by hitting the remaining cars, which set off a slew of alarms. He did this throughout the building, and it diverted the gang's attention. But one of the gang members came out the back door and ran into Nick, tried to get rid of him, and after a violent argument, he put him in the car and pushed it off the roof of the building. As a result, another gang member was killed. Nick, on the other hand, got into another car and successfully escaped the rest of the gang. The police arrived late at the scene and confiscated all evidence. Nick, unfortunately, had dropped his wallet on the ground. And this wallet did not end up in the hands of the police, but of Billy, the gang's leader, who sent a man to Nick's workplace to hand him a large box in front of his colleagues. This box contained a picture of Nick's family, and he threatened him. There was also a phone number on the back of the picture. His wife and young son were also covered in blood. He called, much to Nick's horror, and was terrified. Billy responded coldly, saying he would kill his family first before killing him. He then called the investigator and told her what had happened. He ran out to the house after asking the investigator to accompany the police to the house. When he returned home, he discovered the police and discovered that his wife and son were fine. The investigator attempted to question him about what he had done and why the gang decided to exact revenge on him in order to assist him. Despite the fact that he did not tell her anything, the investigator left police officers to protect his home. He couldn't sleep because he was worried about his family, so he sat on the steps of the house until he heard the car alarm and looked out the window to see that the cop had been killed. The gang broke into his house and murdered his wife and young son, but he survived the accident after falling into a long coma. He saw the investigator when he awoke, and he told her that he had killed 2 members of the gang, and she told him that they had killed his wife. His young son is in intensive care, on the verge of death. He jumped out of bed and ran to his son, sobbing because he couldn't protect him and his mother. He felt bad about what had happened, and he changed and became a different person the moment he kissed his son's hand. He fled the hospital and went to the bank to withdraw all of his savings before calling his colleague to inquire about the number Billy had dialed. He recognized the number as belonging to a bar called the Four Roses. He went to the bar to look for Billy, but the worker pretended not to understand English. But he was so enraged that he broke the entire place as well as hitting the people present, until one of them told him that Billy was in a nearby apartment with a man named Heiko. He asked the worker where he could buy weapons before leaving. Unfortunately for him, the worker directed him to Billy's father's shop after he selected and paid for the weapons. Billy's father stopped him before he left because he knew Nick had purchased the gun to murder his son. But Nick was taken aback when he left him and announced that he would finally get rid of his son. He was taught how to use a weapon. He stood in front of Hiko's apartment door, and before knocking, he remembered that he was no longer Nick and opened the door in his own way. He shot a hole in the door and walked in. However, he only found Hiko, and after hitting him, told him that Billy was in an abandoned hospital and gave him the address. But before leaving, he made Hiko call Billy and inform him that Nick had sentenced him to death. And this was Nick's response to Billy's box threatening his family. Billy realizes Nick is out for vengeance, and before he hangs up, he hears the sound of a shot fired by Nick at Heiko. Billy decided to flee, taking everything he owned with him. But before he fled, he ran into his father, who told him that he loved him, and that he needed to flee quickly before the man from whom he had purchased the weapons found him. But because Billy had a cruel heart, he murdered his father and stole his car before fleeing. As promised by Billy, who arrives to join his colleagues in killing Nick. Nick arrives at the abandoned hospital and kills everyone. Nick hid in the dark and slaughtered the gang members one by one until he came to an open room, and Billy appeared behind him. They began shooting at each other until they were both hit. After they ran out of ammunition, they sat dying in one chair. But Nick had purchased a third gun, pulled it out, and murdered Billy. He returned home after disposing of the entire gang. And when the cops arrived, they were taken aback by his lack of resistance. When the investigator informed him that his little son had begun to move, he remained seated and watching TV. Finally, he chose to die at home, while watching a videotape of his family. The film ends here. That's a wrap on our recap of Death Sentence. I hope you enjoyed this thrilling tale of a man's quest to protect his family at any cost. The journey of Nick Hume, as he transforms from a grieving husband to a fearless protector, was truly captivating, and we're honored to have shared it with you through our recap. Remember to follow us here at Benjamin Recaps for all your movie recap needs. We bring you the latest and greatest in film and television, always keeping you up to date on the newest releases and classic favorites. And if you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. As always, thank you for tuning in, and we can't wait to bring you even more exciting content in the future. So until next time, stay tuned for more Benjamin Recaps.